Nobody expected the WNBA's biggest threat to appear at the exact moment the league was finally breaking through. For years, fans, analysts, and players begged for more visibility, better marketing, and real investment. Then suddenly, 2024 arrived and everything clicked at once. Arenas were packed with fans who had never watched a women's basketball game before. Television networks fought over broadcasting rights. Social media couldn't stop talking about rookie highlights, buzzer beaters, and rivalries that felt bigger than anything the league had experienced in decades. The WNBA wasn't just growing, it was exploding. This was the season everything was supposed to change. But while the league was busy celebrating its long-awaited success, something far more dangerous was taking shape quietly in the background. At first, it appeared as nothing more than scattered whispers online. Vague reports of a mysterious overseas league planning to enter women's basketball. The stories sounded too dramatic to be real. The WNBA had faced competition before, and none of it ever threatened the league's status as the highest level of the sport. Most people brushed it off, assuming it was just another off-season storyline that would fade away. Except it didn't fade. It grew. Behind closed doors, an international group backed by Middle Eastern sovereign wealth was building something enormous. A fully funded, purpose-built league designed specifically to pull WNBA players away from the United States. Not for a season. Not for a quick paycheck. But permanently. This wasn't a typical overseas contract meant to supplement a WNBA salary. This was a direct challenge. A rival league with pockets deeper than anything women's basketball had ever seen, operating with a kind of budget that could reshape the economics of the entire sport. Within weeks, the rumors evolved into hard, unavoidable facts. Agents began receiving calls. Top players were approached. Executives inside the WNBA started hearing things they were never supposed to hear. Offers, numbers, terms, and not small ones. Massive, life-changing, almost unbelievable amounts of guaranteed money. Conversations that once felt hypothetical suddenly became very real. The question everyone was asking behind the scenes was simple. If these offers are real, how does the WNBA survive this? The shift in tone around the league was immediate. The same season that was meant to represent the league's arrival on the global stage suddenly became the backdrop to a crisis with no playbook, no precedent, and no easy solution. As the stories spread through locker rooms, training facilities, and front offices, the mood changed from celebration to uncertainty. The league had spent nearly 3 decades building momentum, and now a newcomer, backed by unlimited resources, was ready to take everything the WNBA had worked for. What made the situation feel even more alarming was how quickly players began paying attention. Many of them had spent years grinding through intense, year-round schedules. Summers in the WNBA, winters overseas, barely any rest in between. They loved the game, but the financial reality of their careers forced them to take every available opportunity. So when a new league appeared offering salaries no one could have imagined, players didn't dismiss it, they listened. And with each conversation, the cracks in the WNBA's foundation became harder to ignore. The league's best season had suddenly collided with its greatest threat. A perfect storm forming at the worst possible time. And as the news spread, one thing became clear. This wasn't a temporary challenge. It was a shift, a massive one, that could change women's basketball forever. The heart of the crisis comes down to one brutal, undeniable truth. The numbers simply don't match. The WNBA can promote growth, celebrate rising ratings, and highlight record-breaking moments. But when players finally see the financial comparison laid out in front of them, loyalty suddenly becomes a luxury very few can afford. And the gap isn't small. It's a canyon. Under the current WNBA system, even the league's brightest stars operate under strict salary limitations. A player considered elite, someone who fills arenas and drives national conversation, tops out at around $250,000 per year. That number looks even smaller when you consider the physical toll of a season, the endorsements they have to chase on the side, and the reality that most players' careers last only a few years before injuries or competition push them out of the league entirely. For rookies, the situation is even tougher. Many of the youngest, most talented players enter the league making around $76,000 a season, an amount that barely reflects their impact on the sport, let alone the revenue they help generate. Meanwhile, the WNBA operates with a salary cap of roughly $1.46 million per entire team, meaning even if every owner wanted to pay more, the structure physically prevents it. That cap system was built to keep the league stable and sustainable, but now it has created a massive vulnerability. While the WNBA moves slowly and carefully, this new overseas league operates with no such restrictions. No cap. No constraints. No hesitation. The offers coming from overseas defy everything players have known about women's basketball income. Role players, not stars, not all WNBA selections, not MVP candidates, are being offered around $2 million per season. That means an athlete who normally earns $80,000 to $150,000 in the WNBA would instantly step into a salary 10 to 20 times higher. And that's just for the supporting cast. Mid-tier stars, the types of players who are known league-wide but may not be the face of a franchise, are being shown contracts in the range of $5 million to $10 million annually. Then there are the superstars, the faces of the league. The players whose names trend online every time they hit a big shot or deliver a viral highlight. Reports suggest those athletes are receiving offers that don't sound real, sums that seem closer to NBA-level money than anything women's basketball has ever experienced. Multi-year deals ranging from $50 million to over $100 million. Some rumors even suggest a potential $200 million contract waiting for the right marquee player. In the WNBA, $200 million is a fantasy. In this new league, it's a starting point for negotiation. This isn't just a financial upgrade, it's an economic earthquake. A player earning $100,000 in the WNBA would literally need 2 decades to match a single season's minimum salary overseas. The math is so lopsided that it barely feels like a comparison. For athletes with short career windows and long-term financial worries, the decision becomes less about ambition and more about survival. It's hard to turn down the chance to change not only your life but the lives of your parents, your siblings, and even your future children. And there's another layer to the problem. Many WNBA players already rely on overseas basketball to make ends meet. For years, it's been normal for top players to jump into foreign leagues immediately after the WNBA season ends. They don't do it to chase adventure. They do it because their WNBA checks aren't enough to build the kind of financial security male athletes take for granted. That means these players are already used to traveling, adapting, and managing life abroad. So when a new league offers to pay them not just more money, but enormously more money, it doesn't feel like an unfamiliar leap. It feels like they're finally being paid what they're worth. The economic reality leaves the WNBA in an impossible position. No amount of league pride or national loyalty can compete with generational wealth. And as these offers circulate among players, agents, and training staffs, the pressure builds. Conversations that once centered around off-season plans now revolve around financial comparisons. Players talk in group chats. Agents compare offers. Executives whisper about who's next. And every time a new number gets revealed, the WNBA falls further behind. The league has always asked players to trust the process. To believe that growth takes time. To accept that bigger salaries will come, eventually. But eventually isn't good enough anymore. Not when another league is offering everything players have been waiting for right now. The first real shockwave didn't come from a superstar, a former MVP, or the face of a franchise. It came from Sophie Cunningham, and that's exactly why her decision rattled the league so deeply. Cunningham has always been more than just a name on a roster. She carved out a place in the WNBA not by being the flashiest scorer or the most decorated athlete, but by becoming one of the league's most relatable, charismatic, and marketable personalities. Fans connected with her. Kids loved her energy. Social media amplified her presence in ways the league desperately needed. She wasn't just a player, she was a personality the WNBA could build around. So when the news broke that Cunningham had accepted one of the multi-million-dollar offers from the new overseas league, it wasn't just surprising, it was symbolic. It was a message written in bold letters across the entire basketball world. If someone like Sophie is willing to leave, anyone might be next. Cunningham wasn't at the absolute top tier of WNBA stardom. She wasn't pulling in MVP votes or dominating league-wide awards. She wasn't the player whose jersey sold out minutes after hitting stores. But that's what made her departure so dangerous. She represented the upper middle class of WNBA talent, players who are recognizable, valuable, and essential to the league's long-term health. They fill out the majority of starting lineups. They keep games competitive. They engage fans online and bring personality to broadcasts and interviews. They're the backbone of the entire product. And if that backbone begins walking out the door, everything becomes unstable. Reports said that Cunningham's deal overseas dwarfed her entire career earnings from her 6 seasons in the WNBA. Think about that. 6 years of work, practices, games, off-season travel, emotional pressure, endless media obligations, outweighed in a single contract by a league that didn't even exist a year ago. That kind of money doesn't just tempt players, it resets their entire decision-making process. The financial security she accepted wasn't merely life-changing, it was life-defining. Inside the WNBA, the reaction was immediate. Players saw the numbers. They did the math. They looked at their own salaries, their own long-term goals, their own families, and realized something uncomfortable. Staying in the league they had dreamed about since childhood might actually be the financially risky choice. Some players admitted privately that they were shocked by how quickly their minds shifted. One moment, the WNBA was the goal. The next, it looked like the smaller, less stable option compared to a rival that operated like a financial powerhouse. And the psychology behind this shift is powerful. Athletes monitor each other constantly. They watch contract negotiations. They pay attention to endorsements. They compare offers and weigh decisions based on trends. When one player takes a groundbreaking deal, others start wondering what they're missing. When a second player leaves, the idea becomes normalized. By the time a third or fourth makes the jump, the floodgates open. Cunningham wasn't just an early defector, she was the catalyst. Her move sent a ripple through locker rooms across the league. Veteran players took notice. Younger players started asking their agents more pointed questions. Stars who once brushed off rumors began quietly evaluating their own options. Even players with no intention of leaving suddenly had leverage they never imagined before. And that's what the WNBA feared most. Because if a player like Sophie Cunningham, someone skilled enough to matter, beloved enough to bring fans, and influential enough to shape narratives, was willing to leave at the height of her career, then the league's worst nightmare wasn't hypothetical anymore. It was happening in real time. The Overseas League wasn't targeting one superstar, it was creating a system capable of pulling entire tiers of players away. The first domino had fallen. And the league knew exactly who the next one might be, the player the entire future of the sport had been built around. If Sophie Cunningham's departure shook the league, the situation surrounding Caitlin Clark sent it into full-scale panic mode. Clark isn't just another rookie. She isn't simply a promising young star. She is the most influential women's basketball player of her generation. The kind of athlete who changes television ratings, sells out arenas, shifts national sports conversations, and turns casual viewers into dedicated fans. Her final college season at Iowa didn't just attract attention, it broke records that once seemed untouchable. Millions tuned in to watch her play. Entire arenas filled up hours before tip-off. Every step she took on the court became a headline. When she entered the WNBA, that momentum didn't slow down, it accelerated. The Indiana Fever instantly became must-watch basketball. Roads clogged as fans lined up outside stadiums waiting for a chance to see her warm up. Opposing arenas saw record ticket sales the moment the schedule showed a Clark matchup. Networks discovered that featuring her in a broadcast guaranteed the kind of viewership numbers that sponsors dream about. Even people who had never watched a minute of women's basketball suddenly became invested in her story. She wasn't just a player. She was a phenomenon. So when reports surfaced that the new Middle Eastern-backed league had offered her a contract ranging from $50 million to a staggering $200 million, the sports world stopped. Fans didn't know whether to laugh, panic, or reread the numbers to make sure they weren't hallucinating. But the offers were real, not speculative, not rumored without context, but genuinely on the table. And even if the final number settles somewhere in the middle, the amount is still so large that it makes the WNBA's salary structure look like a relic from another era. To put it into perspective, Clark currently earns around $76,000 in the WNBA, A paycheck that doesn't align even slightly with the revenue and attention she generates. Even if she eventually qualifies for the maximum contract, the ceiling sits around $250,000 a year. That means this overseas offer would pay her more in a single season than she could earn in 200 entire years of WNBA basketball. No athlete, no matter how loyal or passionate, can ignore a comparison that extreme. Money that large doesn't just secure a future. It secures an entire family's future for generations. And that's where the chaos really begins. Clark represents everything the WNBA has been hoping for since its founding. A transcendent talent capable of pulling the league into mainstream relevance. A player whose appeal cuts across demographics: young fans, old fans, men, women, casual viewers, non-sports audiences. She broke through in a way no one predicted and no one was prepared for. The league's 2024 boom was fueled by her presence, and every marketing plan, every television partnership, every sponsorship pitch, every strategic vision for the next decade quietly revolved around one assumption: Caitlin Clark will be part of the WNBA's future. But that future is suddenly uncertain. On one side, Clark carries the weight of a legacy she could build in the United States. She could become the definitive figure in women's basketball history. The athlete credited with elevating the WNBA to levels it has never reached before. Her influence could reshape youth basketball participation, sponsorship strategies, long-term media deals, and cultural perception. She could be the Michael Jordan of the women's game. On the other side sits an offer so enormous that it erases every traditional argument: loyalty, legacy, patriotism, tradition, in a single stroke. Telling a 22-year-old to decline tens or hundreds of millions of dollars for the good of the league is an impossible ask. Fans might romanticize loyalty, but athletes understand the harsh reality. Careers are short, injuries happen without warning, and financial stability isn't something you gamble with. Inside the WNBA, Clark's looming decision has created a level of tension rarely seen in professional sports. Executives know the league's financial structure can't compete. Teammates understand the magnitude of what she's considering. Opponents realize that if she leaves, the entire competitive landscape shifts. And fans, both loyal and newly arrived, are holding their breath, hoping that the player who brought them into the league doesn't walk away before her prime. The most unsettling part? No one knows which way she's leaning. She has remained quiet publicly, offering standard answers that reveal nothing. But behind the scenes, discussions are happening. Evaluations are being made. And the people closest to the situation understand something the public doesn't want to admit. This isn't a negotiation the WNBA can win. If Clark leaves, the league loses more than a superstar. It loses momentum, identity, and the face of the sport. The ripple effects would be enormous, bigger than any single off-season move in league history. And that possibility is enough to shake the WNBA at its core. As the crisis unfolded, one figure found herself standing in the center of the storm: WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert. When she took over the league in 2019, Engelbert was seen as a stabilizing force. A seasoned business leader with a proven track record, someone capable of guiding the WNBA through a changing sports landscape. And to her credit, she delivered tangible progress during her early years. She secured improved travel conditions, negotiated new television partnerships, boosted league visibility, and helped push players' salaries higher than they had ever been. For a while, it felt like she was steering the league toward a long-awaited breakthrough. Then 2024 happened. The greatest season in the league's history, but also the one that exposed more weaknesses than any before it. As crowds surged and media attention skyrocketed, the WNBA found itself facing challenges it had never encountered at this scale. Players weren't just dealing with packed arenas, they were dealing with security risks, aggressive fans crossing boundaries, and the kind of attention that demanded professional-level protection. Some athletes spoke openly about being followed, yelled at, or cornered by spectators who treated them like characters in an online debate rather than actual human beings. Several players hinted that they didn't feel safe, a devastating message for any league trying to grow. But instead of calming the fire, Engelbert's responses often made things worse. Players felt that the league was too slow to react, too hesitant to acknowledge the seriousness of the problem, and too corporate in its communication. Comments that were meant to reassure came across as dismissive. The more players voiced concerns, the more they felt the league office was dodging responsibility. Public statements sounded polished, but behind-the-scenes conversations suggested that athletes were frustrated, unheard, and increasingly skeptical of the leadership meant to protect them. Then came the financial issue, the one the commissioner could never spin away. Players saw the skyrocketing attention, the viral moments, the packed arenas, the sponsorship deals, and the massive TV coverage. They heard the league brag about record revenue and unprecedented growth. But when they looked at their own paychecks, nothing matched. While the league celebrated progress, players were being asked to accept necessary limitations and business realities. That message was fine a few years ago. In 2024, it felt outdated, tone-deaf, and completely disconnected from what athletes believed they were worth. And this frustration didn't stay quiet. Multiple players began speaking out publicly, not in vague hints, but in direct criticism. They accused leadership of ignoring long-standing issues. They complained that the league seemed unprepared for the new wave of attention, especially when it came to security. They pointed out that the players themselves were generating the league's momentum, yet they remained the last ones to benefit financially. These complaints weren't coming from bench players or fringe talent. They were coming from stars, athletes whose influence shaped public perception. When they spoke, fans listened. And when those stars hinted that leadership wasn't doing enough, supporters began questioning Engelbert's approach. It didn't take long for tension to grow between the commissioner's office and the people who actually took the court every night. Then the Overseas League entered the picture, and every weakness in the WNBA's infrastructure suddenly became a glaring vulnerability. Owners began holding closed-door discussions. Reports surfaced of emergency board meetings. Executives questioned whether the league had been too slow to modernize. And whispers started spreading. Whispers that Engelbert might not survive the year if the talent migration grew worse. For some owners, the idea of losing major players wasn't just a disappointment, it was a threat to their investments. Several franchises had poured tens of millions into new practice facilities, upgraded arenas, improved marketing, and long-term development plans. Losing top talent would jeopardize all of it. Critics argued that Engelbert should have anticipated international competition. Others insisted that no commissioner could possibly prepare for a league backed by unlimited resources. But fairness didn't matter, optics did. And the optics were brutal. The WNBA's most important players were considering leaving under her watch. The sports world has seen this before. When a league begins losing stars, the first person blamed is the commissioner. Not the owners. Not the financial system. Not the global forces at play. The commissioner becomes the face of failure, even when the situation is nearly impossible to manage. And that's exactly the pressure Engelbert is facing now. Her leadership brought the WNBA to the highest point it had ever reached, and somehow, that success has become the backdrop to its most dangerous challenge. As negotiations continue overseas and WNBA stars weigh their futures, the commissioner stands on increasingly shaky ground, criticized from above and below, and forced to confront a crisis that could define her entire legacy. Even if every owner, every executive, and every fan banded together with complete unity, the WNBA would still be trapped in a financial battle it can't realistically win. Not because of poor leadership. Not because of bad planning. But because the fundamental structure of the league was never built to withstand competition from an organization backed by sovereign wealth funding. Money that functions with no ceiling, no constraint, and no requirement to generate profit in the traditional sense. The WNBA is fighting with tools designed for long-term sustainability, while its new rival is operating with resources powerful enough to reshape entire global industries. For most of its existence, the WNBA has depended heavily on the NBA for stability. The revenue the league brings in on its own is modest compared to major men's sports, and for years the primary focus has been survival and gradual growth. Owners invested cautiously. Salaries increased slowly. Facilities improved step by step. In a world without external competition, this steady, structured progression made sense. It allowed the league to avoid financial collapse and build credibility year after year. But the moment a foreign league entered the picture with the ability to offer 8-figure salaries without blinking, the entire WNBA financial system was exposed. The salary cap, the contract limits, the league's revenue-sharing model. All of it was designed for a world in which the WNBA was the undisputed top destination for elite women's basketball talent. That world no longer exists. And the league's economic structure simply can't pivot overnight. Even if the WNBA wanted to triple salaries tomorrow, the math wouldn't work. Increasing the salary cap to match overseas offers would require an infusion of hundreds of millions of dollars each season. The league would need new TV contracts worth multiple billions, not millions. Corporate sponsorships would have to skyrocket beyond anything women's sports have ever seen. Even NBA owners, some of the wealthiest individuals in North American sports, would balk at the financial demands required to compete directly with Middle Eastern sovereign wealth. Fans often ask, why doesn't the WNBA just raise salaries? Why don't the owners step up? The answer is simple. They can't. Not at this scale. Not at this speed. The WNBA isn't built like LIV Golf or some of the world's richest soccer clubs. It doesn't operate with the financial freedom to lose money indefinitely. Every dollar spent must be justified. Every investment must be tied to revenue. That's the reality of a league still fighting for profitability, still balancing budgets, and still working to convince mainstream audiences to commit long-term. Meanwhile, the overseas league doesn't face those restrictions. It isn't bound by a salary cap. It doesn't have shareholders demanding quarterly returns. It doesn't have to operate like a traditional business at all. Instead, it functions like a national project, a tool to build influence, expand global visibility, and reshape the image of an entire region through sport. That kind of mission can justify spending hundreds of millions or even billions without expecting anything in return for years, maybe decades. It's the same economic mismatch that pressured the PGA Tour into merging with LIV Golf. The same imbalance that helped Saudi-backed soccer clubs lure global icons away from Europe. When the financial firepower is this uneven, even successful, stable leagues find themselves overwhelmed. The WNBA is facing that same imbalance, but with even higher stakes, because the players being targeted aren't just famous athletes. They're the core of an emerging sports movement that has spent decades trying to gain mainstream traction. The league's owners understand the problem better than anyone. They know the WNBA can't simply flip a switch and manufacture billions of dollars. But that doesn't stop the pressure. Some owners are frustrated that no contingency plan was ever built for this scenario. Others blame league leadership for failing to adapt quickly enough as international rumors grew louder. And still others believe that even perfect leadership wouldn't change the situation, because money this large flattens every argument. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Losing players isn't just a short-term setback. It's a long-term destabilizer. If enough stars leave, TV networks reevaluate contracts. Sponsors hesitate. Attendance drops in certain markets. Storylines lose momentum. Fans new to the league, the ones drawn in by viral highlights and superstar names, may drift away. That's the economic trap the WNBA is caught in. It can't afford to match the offers, but it also can't afford to lose the players receiving them. The league is stuck between two impossible choices: raise salaries beyond sustainable limits or watch the biggest names walk away. Neither option leads to an easy future. And that is the reality that has players, executives, and fans silently fearing what the next few months may bring. To truly understand the danger facing the WNBA, you have to zoom out and look at the global sports landscape as a whole. What's happening right now isn't random, and it isn't limited to basketball. It's part of a much larger pattern, one that has been reshaping entire sports, entire leagues, and entire traditions at incredible speed. Over the last decade, Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds have become some of the most aggressive financial forces in global athletics, and their strategy is simple. Invest massive amounts of money to acquire influence, reshape industries, and become essential power players in international sports culture. This strategy isn't hypothetical. It has already transformed multiple sports in ways that stunned longtime fans and professionals. The most well-known example is LIV Golf, a league that didn't exist until it suddenly appeared with enough financial muscle to challenge the PGA Tour, an institution that had dominated professional golf for generations. At first, critics laughed at the idea. They dismissed LIV as a sideshow with no chance of pulling major athletes away. But then the offers started. Hundreds of millions. Life-changing guarantees. Money that would take decades to earn on the PGA Tour, suddenly available upfront in a single contract. Phil Mickelson accepted one of those deals. Dustin Johnson accepted. Brooks Koepka accepted. And once those stars moved, the entire golf world changed. The PGA Tour panicked, fought back, launched PR campaigns, banned certain players, and still found itself overwhelmed by an opponent with financial resources too large to compete with. Eventually, the two sides reached a merger framework, a public acknowledgement that even the best established leagues can't resist indefinitely when the money gap is that extreme. Then there's soccer. Clubs in Saudi Arabia began offering enormous sums to global icons. Cristiano Ronaldo, Neymar, Karim Benzema, Sadio Mane, and many others. Some of these players were still at the height of their careers. Others were nearing the twilight of their prime. But the offers were so massive that they generated headlines across continents. And once again, the pattern repeated. People mocked the idea at first, then watched in disbelief as superstar after superstar accepted deals no European team could match. It didn't stop there. Formula One expanded its presence into the region with high-profile events and massive sponsorships. Boxing megafights moved to Middle Eastern venues with unprecedented purses. Even esports and combat sports felt the impact. What started as a slow drip of investments eventually became a flood. Now women's basketball is facing that same flood. And this time, the timing is perfect for the investors, and catastrophic for the WNBA. The Overseas League isn't simply trying to compete. It's trying to redefine the sport on a global level. By offering massive salaries, it positions itself as the natural destination for elite talent, instantly bypassing decades of slow, incremental WNBA growth. It can build state-of-the-art arenas, hire world-class coaches, invest in national broadcasting, and create marketing campaigns worth tens of millions, all without worrying about immediate revenue. Meanwhile, the WNBA is still fighting for mainstream acceptance, still negotiating for better media coverage, still building legitimacy one season at a time. The two leagues aren't even playing the same game financially. This global shift creates a terrifying question for WNBA executives. If other sports couldn't resist this financial wave, what chance does a still-developing women's league have? Golf couldn't resist it. Soccer couldn't resist it. Combat sports couldn't resist it. Why would women's basketball be any different? The answer is uncomfortable. It might not be. And what makes the threat unique here is the timing. Women's basketball is at its most vulnerable precisely because it's at its most successful. The league is gaining momentum, yes, but it hasn't solidified its position. Its fan base is rapidly expanding, but not locked in. Its revenue is improving, but nowhere near stable enough to protect against a financial war. Its stars are becoming household names, but they haven't yet reached the level of long-term endorsement power that might convince them to stay. The Overseas League knows this. That's why it's striking now. Every major sports disruption in the last decade has followed the same formula. Find the weak spot, enter during a moment of transition, and offer enough money to shift the balance of power instantly. And right now, the WNBA is sitting in the most vulnerable position imaginable. Thriving, but not yet secure. This isn't just a story about basketball players making more money overseas. It's about a global financial force that has already rewritten the rules of multiple sports, now turning its attention to a league that is still fighting for its place in the American sports landscape. And unless something dramatic changes, the WNBA may find itself joining the growing list of organizations that simply couldn't withstand the shock. The WNBA has survived lockouts, financial droughts, low viewership eras, and decades of slow, uphill progress, but nothing in its history compares to the threat it faces now. The possibility of losing not just one or two athletes but an entire generation of elite talent isn't just a setback. It's the kind of event that can permanently alter the identity of a league. And inside front offices across the country, executives know exactly how fragile things could become if the exodus grows. The first major consequence would hit the league's competitive quality. If 10 to 15 of the top players left, even if they weren't the absolute biggest names, the on-court product would suffer immediately. Matchups that once felt electric would lose their spark. Rivalries would lose their star power. Primetime games would lose the athletes who make them worth watching. Fans are drawn to greatness, and if greatness moves overseas, the league's emotional core weakens. Then there's the issue of attendance. The WNBA's attendance spike in 2024 wasn't random. It was driven by specific players and specific storylines. Fans didn't just show up for teams, they showed up for individuals. They came to see the long-range shooting, the deep rivalries, the personalities, the showmanship. The league finally had athletes who created must-see moments, and fans responded. Remove those players, and the ticket demand that looked unstoppable suddenly becomes unpredictable. Some markets might maintain support. Others could drop sharply. Next comes television, the lifeline of every major sports league. Networks pay for stars. Advertisers pay for stars. Broadcasters build storylines around stars. A league without its top-tier talent becomes a tougher sell. Contract negotiations shift from record-breaking potential to risk assessment. When scheduling meetings start, executives think twice about placing WNBA matchups in high-visibility windows. That hesitation ripples through everything: sponsorships, merchandise sales, marketing strategies, and long-term investment plans. One of the most understated consequences involves new fans. The WNBA gained millions of first-time viewers in 2024, many of whom showed interest because of specific athletes who captured their imagination. If those athletes leave, those fans, who aren't yet fully committed to the league, might follow them overseas or lose interest entirely. Growth depends on retention, and retention depends on familiarity. When stars leave, continuity breaks. The stories fans were just beginning to understand suddenly disappear. Inside the league, the impact on players would be massive too. Those who stay would face increased pressure and increased scrutiny. Younger athletes might worry that the WNBA is becoming a stepping stone instead of a final destination. Veterans might question whether staying is financially wise. Coaches would struggle to plan for long-term rosters. Teams would hesitate to invest heavily in local marketing around players who might disappear at any moment. The psychological impact is just as severe. A league thrives when its players believe in its future. Confidence fuels performance, loyalty, and long-term career decisions. But once doubt enters the room, once players begin asking themselves whether the league they love will still exist in the same form 5 years from now, it becomes harder to maintain unity. Harder to build off-season programs. Harder to attract international prospects. Harder to keep morale high. And then, the most unsettling possibility: the WNBA becoming a development league by accident. If the top-tier stars leave for wealthier overseas contracts, the WNBA could slowly shift into a feeder system. A place where young athletes spend a few years building their brand before jumping to the league offering real money. That's not the future players fought for. That's not the image fans were promised. But it's a future that becomes increasingly realistic if this overseas league continues its aggressive pursuit. In the worst-case scenario, the WNBA doesn't collapse. It shrinks. It becomes a smaller, thinner version of itself, operating with fewer stars, less attention, and limited influence. The league that once stood on the edge of mainstream breakthrough suddenly finds itself fighting to stay relevant in a world where players follow the financial gravity pulling them abroad. And the hardest truth of all is that none of this requires every player to leave. All it takes is a handful of stars, the right names, the right positions, the right personalities, to shift the entire balance of power. If Caitlin Clark, or even a few players just below her level, choose the overseas path, the WNBA's ecosystem changes instantly. The league has battled adversity before, but this moment is different. This time, the threat doesn't come from external criticism, unequal media coverage, or lack of investment. It comes from a rival with deeper pockets, sharper timing, and a willingness to rewrite the rules. Whether the WNBA can withstand this pressure remains unknown. And that uncertainty hangs over every player, every fan, every executive, and every future storyline waiting to unfold. The world of women's basketball is standing at its most unpredictable crossroads. For decades, the WNBA fought for legitimacy, attention, and investment, slowly building its foundation while pushing against a system that moved frustratingly slow. Then, almost overnight, everything changed. The league found itself in the middle of a cultural surge unlike anything in its history. Packed arenas, surging ratings, viral moments that traveled across the world, players who became household names. It was the breakthrough everyone had been waiting for. But with that breakthrough came a challenge no one saw coming. A direct competitor with enough financial firepower to rewrite the entire structure of the sport. A league that didn't need to play by the same rules. A league that didn't need to balance budgets or build slowly. A league that could simply decide to offer more money than anyone else, and do it without hesitation. Now every conversation inside the WNBA, from front offices to locker rooms to broadcast studios, carries the weight of an uncertain future. The athletes who helped drive this historic moment forward are being forced into impossible decisions. Chase generational wealth or stay and help continue building a league that's still fighting for stability. No matter what they choose, there will be consequences. For the league, for the fans, for the sport itself. Maybe the WNBA finds a way to adapt. Maybe new investors step in. Maybe the pressure forces the league to accelerate its growth faster than ever before. Or maybe the overseas league continues its aggressive pursuit and changes the landscape permanently, pulling star after star into a new global ecosystem. Right now, no one can say for certain what will happen next. But one thing is clear. The next few years will decide the direction of women's basketball for an entire generation. And if you've made it this far into the video, it means you understand the stakes, and you want to stay ahead of the story. This channel is growing, but right now the subscriber count is still low. If you want to keep getting deep, detailed breakdowns like this, and you want to stay updated as the situation continues to evolve, then make sure you're part of that early community. Before you click away, do 3 simple things that genuinely help more than you realize. Subscribe to the channel. It pushes the content to more viewers and tells the algorithm people want long-form analysis like this. Like the video, it boosts engagement and helps new audiences discover the topic. Leave a comment. Even a short sentence helps the video rank higher, and it lets me know what stories you want covered next. Your support doesn't just help the channel. It helps keep important conversations like this alive. Women's basketball is changing fast, and together, we're going to follow every twist, every deal, and every major shift as it happens. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.